Something is coming in Bridgerton season 5 that no one saw coming. And once it begins, there will be no way to stop it. This is not the kind of story that announces itself with loud scandal or dramatic entrances. No, this time, it starts quietly, almost invisibly, like a single thought that refuses to go away, like a feeling that should not exist, but does. And by the time the world of Mayfair realizes what is truly happening, it will already be too late. Because this season is not just about love. It is about the moment love becomes something the world cannot control. The world of Mayfair has always believed it understood everything. It understood rules. It understood reputation. It understood exactly how love was supposed to work. Love was never meant to be wild or unpredictable. It was meant to be guided, shaped, and approved. Every glance had meaning. Every conversation had purpose. And every relationship followed a path that society had already decided long before anyone dared to feel something different. That is how the Ton survived for so long, by keeping everything in its place. But something has shifted, and the most dangerous part is, no one notices it at first, because change in Mayfair never arrives with noise. It arrives in silence. At the center of this quiet shift is Francesca Bridgerton, a woman who has already lived through a version of love that most people only dream of. She has known connection, she has known understanding, and more importantly, she has known loss. The kind of loss that does not just take a person away, but changes the way you exist after they are gone. It teaches you how to stay quiet. It teaches you how to survive without asking for too much. And slowly, it teaches you how to stop expecting anything at all. When Francesca returns to society, she does not return as someone searching for love. That part of her feels distant now, almost like something that belonged to another life. Instead, she returns with a different intention. Simpler, safer. She wants stability. She wants peace. She wants a life that makes sense again. A life that follows rules she already understands. And in a world like Mayfair, that should be easy. Because society is always ready to guide someone like her back into place. There are expectations waiting for her. Unspoken, but very clear. A widow cannot remain alone forever. A woman of her name cannot drift outside structure for too long. There must be a return, a re-entry, a careful rebuilding of everything that was lost, but in a way that feels acceptable to everyone watching. And Francesca tries. She steps back into gatherings. She allows conversations. She listens when suitable futures are quietly suggested to her. Everything she does is measured, controlled, and careful. From the outside, it looks perfect. It looks exactly like what the Ton expects from someone in her position. But something underneath it all feels off. Not wrong, not broken, just incomplete. Like she is moving forward, but leaving something behind without fully understanding what it is. And that is where everything begins. Not with a decision, not with a mistake, but with a presence. Because into this carefully controlled world enters Michaela Sterling, and nothing about her fits neatly into the patterns Mayfair depends on. She does not move like someone seeking approval. She does not speak like someone measuring every word for acceptance. There is a kind of quiet confidence in her, something steady and unshaken, as if she exists outside the need to belong in the way others do. She is not loud, she is not dramatic, but there is something about her that shifts the energy of every space she enters. At first, it means nothing, just another introduction, another face in a world full of them. But then, it lingers, in small ways, in the way conversations feel slightly different when she is near, in the way silence does not feel empty around her, in the way Francesca, without realizing it, begins to notice things she never used to notice before. A pause that lasts a second too long, a glance that carries something unspoken, a feeling that cannot be explained, and yet refuses to be ignored. And this is where the danger begins. Because in Mayfair, feelings are only safe when they are understood. And this is not. Francesca does what she has always done when something feels uncertain. She contains it. She gives it a simple explanation. She tells herself it is nothing more than a passing distraction, a moment shaped by loneliness, a quiet reaction to grief that has not fully settled yet. It makes sense. It feels logical. And for a while, it works. But feelings like this are not loud in the beginning. They are patient. They do not demand attention. They wait for it. And the more Francesca tries to move forward in the direction expected of her, the more this quiet presence begins to follow her. Not physically, not obviously, but internally, in thoughts she cannot fully silence, in moments where everything else fades and she finds herself aware of something she cannot name. Michaela does not push. She does not force closeness. She does not create situations that demand attention. She simply exists. And somehow, that is enough. Because the real shift in this story is not happening in public spaces. It is not happening in dramatic confrontations or whispered scandals. It is happening inside Francesca. Slowly, quietly, irreversibly. And the most unsettling part is, she does not even realize how far it has already gone. Because in a world where everything is controlled, the most dangerous thing is not rebellion. It is recognition. And Francesca Bridgerton is standing at the very edge of it, without yet understanding that once she steps forward, there will be no returning to the life she thought she could rebuild. This is not the beginning of a scandal. This is the beginning of something far more powerful. Something that does not ask for permission. Something that does not follow rules. Something that will not stay hidden forever. The first crack does not appear where anyone expects it. It does not happen in public. It does not come with whispers or raised eyebrows. It does not begin with suspicion. Instead, it begins in something far more dangerous. Comfort, because somewhere between controlled conversations and carefully measured interactions, Francesca begins to feel something she did not plan for. Not excitement, not chaos, not even desire in the way society defines it, but ease. And that is what unsettles her the most, because ease was never part of the rules. With Michaela, there is no performance. No need to calculate every word before speaking it. No pressure to fit into a version of herself that others find acceptable. Their conversations remain simple on the surface, almost ordinary. Nothing that would raise concern, nothing that could be pointed at and labeled as inappropriate. And yet, everything about it feels different. There are pauses that stretch longer than they should. Silences that feel full instead of empty. Moments where Francesca forgets, just for a second, that she is supposed to be careful, that she is supposed to remain contained. And those moments begin to stay with her. Long after they pass, this is where the shift deepens. Because Francesca is no longer just reacting to Michaela's presence. She begins to anticipate it, without meaning to, without admitting it. There is a quiet awareness that starts to follow her through every room, every gathering, every conversation that feels just slightly less real when Michaela is not there. And that awareness changes everything, not visibly, but internally. Francesca still does what is expected of her. She attends events. She speaks with the right people. She allows herself to be seen in the company of those who represent stability and approval. On the surface, nothing has changed. But inside, something is no longer aligned. Because the life she is trying to rebuild begins to feel like something she is stepping into rather than something she belongs to. And the more she notices that feeling, the harder it becomes to ignore. Michaela, however, does not chase the change. She does not demand clarity. She does not ask questions that force answers. Instead, she remains steady, present in a way that feels both grounding and unsettling at the same time, as if she already understands something Francesca is still trying to deny. And that understanding creates its own kind of tension. Because now, Francesca is no longer just dealing with a feeling. She is dealing with being seen, truly seen, in a way that goes beyond words, beyond expectations, beyond the version of herself she has spent so long maintaining for the world around her. And that kind of visibility is not easy to carry, especially in a place like Mayfair, because the ton may not notice everything, but it notices enough. At first, it is subtle, a glance that lingers a second too long, a conversation that ends too abruptly, a shift in attention that cannot be fully explained, nothing obvious, nothing that could be called out directly, but in a society built on observation, even the smallest inconsistencies begin to form patterns, and patterns lead to questions. Francesca feels it before she sees it, the weight of attention that is not yet spoken aloud but is beginning to gather. The quiet awareness that something is being noticed, even if no one has decided what it means yet. And instinctively, she pulls back, not from Michaela completely, but from the spaces where they are seen together, from moments that could be interpreted, even slightly, as something more than they are supposed to be. It is careful, controlled, intentional, a return to structure, a reminder to herself that she understands the rules, and for a moment, it almost works. Because distance creates clarity, or at least the illusion of it. Francesca tells herself that this is what she needs, that whatever she was feeling was simply a moment of imbalance, something that came from grief, from loneliness, from stepping back into a world she had not fully adjusted to yet. She convinces herself that by stepping away, everything will settle back into place, that she will feel like herself again, that things will make sense. But the problem is, she no longer knows which version of herself is real, because the version that exists within expectation feels stable, but distant. And the version that exists in Michaela's presence feels unfamiliar, but honest. And that difference begins to matter more than she wants it to. This is where the emotional conflict begins to take shape. Not as a clear choice, not as a dramatic turning point, but as a quiet tension between two realities, one that is safe and one that is true. Francesca leans harder into the life that is expected of her. She allows herself to consider futures that are predictable, acceptable, and easy to explain. She listens more closely when suitable matches are mentioned. She participates more actively in the structure she once trusted without question. And from the outside, it looks like progress. It looks like healing. It looks like she is moving forward, but internally, it feels like resistance. Because every step she takes toward that life feels heavier than the last. Not because it is wrong, but because it is not complete. And no matter how much she tries to ignore it, that quiet, persistent feeling does not disappear. It waits. It lingers. It returns in the moments she least expects. And Michaela remains exactly where she has always been. Not chasing, not retreating, just present. As if she understands that some truths cannot be forced into the open. They have to be recognized. And Francesca is getting closer to that recognition, whether she is ready for it or not. Because the most dangerous thing about what is happening is not that it exists. It is that it is beginning to feel undeniable. And once a feeling reaches that point, there is no going back to not knowing it. The question is no longer whether something is there. The question is how long Francesca can continue pretending that it is not. The moment everything begins to change is not loud. There is no confrontation. No sudden realization that stops Francesca in her tracks. No single moment she can point to and say, this is where it all shifted. Instead, it happens the way the most dangerous truths always do, gradually, quietly, until ignoring it becomes impossible. Because by now, what Francesca feels is no longer something she can dismiss as confusion. It is no longer a passing reaction shaped by grief or loneliness. It has settled into something far more stable and far more unsettling. It feels real. And that is exactly what makes it so difficult to face, because reality demands acknowledgement, and acknowledgement changes everything. Francesca begins to notice the difference in herself more clearly now. It is not just in how she feels around Michaela, it is in how she feels everywhere else. Conversations that once felt natural now feel rehearsed. Expectations that once felt reasonable now feel restrictive. Even silence, which used to protect her, now feels like something that is holding her back. And that shift creates distance, not just between her and society, but between her and the version of herself she has always relied on. Because for the first time, Francesca is not entirely sure that the life she is trying to return to is the life she actually wants. And that thought alone is enough to destabilize everything. She tries to push it away. Of course she does, because questioning the structure of her world is not something she has ever allowed herself to do. It is easier to believe that she is simply overwhelmed, that she needs time, that everything will settle if she just continues forward the way she is supposed to. But the truth does not fade. It sharpens. Every interaction with Michaela now carries weight, not because anything inappropriate is said or done, but because everything feels intentional, even when it is not. There is an awareness between them that cannot be undone, a quiet understanding that exists beneath every word, every glance, every moment of stillness. And that awareness is becoming harder to hide. Not just from others, but from herself. Michaela still does not push. She does not ask for clarity. She does not force Francesca into a position where she has to explain what she is feeling. Instead, she continues to exist in that same steady, grounded way, as if she is giving Francesca the space to reach her own conclusions. But that space is no longer comfortable. It is filled with questions Francesca can no longer avoid. Because now, the conflict is no longer external. It is internal. And it is growing stronger with every passing moment. Francesca begins to understand something she has been avoiding from the very beginning. This is not about choosing between two people. This is about choosing between two versions of her life. One that is safe, structured, and understood. And one that is uncertain, unspoken, but undeniably real. And for the first time, the safe choice does not feel like the right one. That realization is quiet. But it is powerful. Because once it forms, it cannot be undone. And that is where the pressure begins to build. Not just within Francesca, but around her. Because the ton is no longer simply observing, it is beginning to react. The whispers that once existed at the edges of awareness are becoming more focused now. Still subtle, still controlled, but present in a way that cannot be ignored. Questions are asked more carefully. Observations are made more deliberately. There is a shift in how people look at Francesca, even if no one is willing to say why. And Francesca feels it. The change in perception, the beginning of something she cannot fully control. And instinctively, she tries to correct it. She leans harder into what is expected. She becomes more present in the spaces that define her role in society. She engages more openly with the idea of a future that aligns with what others want for her. It is not dishonest, but it is not entirely true either, because every step she takes in that direction feels like she is moving further away from something she cannot afford to lose. And that something is not just Michaela. It is what Michaela represents, a version of herself that is not shaped by expectation, a version of herself that does not require permission to exist. And that version is becoming harder to ignore. Because once you see yourself clearly, you cannot unsee it. Michaela, in her quiet way, becomes both the center of this shift and the reflection of it. She does not change. She does not adapt to make things easier. She remains exactly who she is, and that consistency becomes its own kind of truth. Because while everything around Francesca feels like it is shifting, Michaela remains steady. And that steadiness begins to feel like something Francesca can trust. More than rules, more than expectations, more than the life she has been trying to rebuild. And that trust is where everything becomes irreversible. Because trust leads to vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to truth. Even when that truth is difficult, even when it changes everything. Francesca is no longer standing at the edge of recognition. She is inside it now, fully aware that what she feels is not temporary, not misplaced, not something that will fade with time. It is something that exists regardless of what she chooses to do about it. And that realization shifts the entire story, because now the question is no longer what is happening. The question is, what is she going to do about it? And in a world like Mayfair, where every choice carries consequence, that question is not simple. It is not safe, and it is not something she can delay forever. Because the more she tries to hold both realities in place, the more unstable everything becomes. Something will have to give. Something will have to break. And deep down, Francesca is beginning to understand that the life she has always known may not survive what comes next. Because this is no longer about quiet tension. This is about transformation. And transformation does not happen without cost.